Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Olszewski, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and submit extraneous material into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to lead this special order, but before I do, I want to thank my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus for their remarks on an issue that is pressing and timely for all of us. I really appreciate the ways in which so many of you have lifted your voices on the scourge that is gun violence in this country. But Mr. Speaker, I rise for this special order because here we are, now 151 days since the beginning of this 119th Congress, and American families have seen zero relief. Nothing has been done to help them as costs continue to rise. This despite promises from the administration and the GOP congressional majority to lower prices on day one. Day one. Instead, this Republican majority is poised to make things worse through the reconciliation process. Just one awful and cruel example, pushing $300 billion of cuts to food supports. In doing so, congressional Republicans will make groceries even more expensive for the 42 million households already struggling to put food on the table every day. 20,000 of those families live in my district. 80% of those households include a child, a senior, a disabled person, or a veteran. Let's let that sink in. SNAP isn't a luxury, it's essential. It provides $6 a day in food assistance to hungry Americans. Just $6. It's a small amount, but it's enough to lift up millions out of poverty and create a foundation of health and well-being. Just $6 can create a pathway to opportunity. But instead, Republicans want to take away food from hungry people, not to balance the budget, because we know this bill actually increases the deficit by nearly $3 trillion, and not to better serve our veterans, because this bill actually reduces funding for our vets. No, Republicans in Congress are doing this in order to fund tax breaks for the wealthiest of individuals and big corporations. Early in my career, I was a public school teacher. I know that a hungry kid cannot learn. That's why when I became Baltimore County executive, in managing a $5 billion budget that I had to balance every year, I prioritized food security, and especially prioritized food security for our children. We leveraged our very modest SNAP dollars and braided it with additional state and local funding to ensure that all kids in Baltimore County, regardless of income level, could now receive a free breakfast or lunch at every single public school. No stigma, no strident rules. We just feed hungry kids. And we feed them in the summer too, having expanded the summer SNAP program to keep kids fed even when school isn't in session. And as a result, behaviors improved. Test scores went up too. And that was no surprise, because research has proven time and time again that kids who receive SNAP benefits in school have higher graduation rates. Access to healthy foods helps develop memory, social skills, and emotional stability. All of these are critical to academic success. And a quality education is the key to opportunity. It empowers our SNAP recipients to lift themselves out of the cycle of poverty. But under these Republican cuts, Maryland and our counties would take on 50 to 75% of the administrative costs of SNAP. The types of expansions we made in Baltimore County and expansions that have happened across this country will likely vanish overnight. In fact, the Urban Institute says that as many as 18.3 million children will lose access to free school meals under these cuts. 18.3 million children. Food banks will be overwhelmed. Children will go hungry, and it will have a domino effect on their education, a domino effect on healthcare costs and healthcare outcomes, and it will have a domino effect on our economy. A Department of Agriculture report called SNAP an economic stabilizer. $1 billion in new SNAP benefits would lead to an increase of $1.54 billion in GDP. In other words, 54% above and beyond the new benefits. That seems like a much better investment to me than borrowing $4 trillion to finance tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy. I am so grateful to all of the colleagues who are joining me tonight, who are speaking about the importance of SNAP in feeding our young people. We represent rural districts and urban districts, communities of means and communities without. There isn't a single member of Congress who does not represent families who rely on SNAP's food supports to make ends meet. We all represent families that are getting squeezed by higher costs, who are too scared to check their retirement accounts, who are putting off having prescriptions filled, or who are falling behind on rent. It's simple. These cuts will lead to suffering, and we must stop them. It is now my privilege to yield to the gentlelady from Virginia, who just co-anchored an incredible special order hour herself, the gentlelady from Virginia, Representative McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My father-in-law was a teacher, and he talked about how in the morning when he would come in to work, he could tell the kids that hadn't eaten at home. And for them, often the first meal they would get was the free or reduced lunch, breakfast and lunch. And he would say, you know, you can't learn if you're hungry. And when you get the sugar high of eating some of what they serve in schools as your first meal, and then you crash around 2 o'clock in the afternoon when it's time for the history lesson, you're not going to learn much. The SNAP cuts in the big billionaire bonus bill literally going to take food off of the table for 42 million Americans, a third of them children. And for the first time ever, is going to force states to pay up to, I think it's 25% of the cost. In Virginia alone, that's going to be $450 million. Now that in and of itself may not sound like a lot. But Virginia is also facing a hole blown in its budget through cuts to Medicaid. Virginia now is being forced to implement work requirements it decided not to implement because when it looked at the other states that did, the administrative costs of the work requirements cost more than the cost to provide care. These states are facing significant cuts to rental assistance, affordable housing funding. And oh, by the way, it's the same people who are now going to get their health care stripped away, who are going to get their food benefits stripped away, who are going to get their rental assistance stripped away. I did a little math, and I lost my sheet, so I'm going on memory for this math, which is dangerous for me. Oh, no, I found it. To qualify for SNAP, a household's gross monthly income must be below 130% of the federal poverty line and their net monthly income below 100%. So what is that? For a household of one, that's net $1,255. For a household of four, that is net $2,600 a month. The average rent in Creighton Court in the city of Richmond, which is public housing, for a two-bedroom unit is $1,103. Gilpin Court, $1,396. This same group of people, under this bill, will be forced to pay a copay for the first time up to $35. And in the Energy and Commerce Committee, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle said, well, they need skin in the game. So what's the big deal? I pay a copay. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle make a little bit more than $1,255, of which they need to pay a little over $1,000 in rent. Now, they've got to choose between putting food on the table or paying that copay to go to the doctor to get preventative care and screenings. What do you think they're going to do? They're not going to the doctor, I'll tell you that. Mr. Speaker, I've talked a lot today, so I'm going to be a little briefer than I intended, but I'm a preacher's kid. And as I listened to the debate on the billionaire bonus bill, I couldn't help but think of Matthew 25, verses 31 through 46, where Jesus said that when he came into his glory in heaven, and all the nations of the earth would come and be divided, and he would turn to the righteous and say, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me. And the righteous will say, well, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in? Or you needing clothes and we clothed you? When did we see you sick or in prison and take care of you or visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did for me. And he will say to the others, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for you. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. And they will say, when did we do this? I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me. Mr. Speaker, I hear some of my friends on the other side of the aisle, including Mr. Speaker, who says, if you want to know my political philosophy, read the Bible. I did. I grew up reading it. And that's the verse that's been sticking in my mind for the last 2 weeks, particularly when we dealt with the Medicaid cuts and the SNAP cuts. And if you think the states are going to be able to make up the difference, you're wrong. And we're going to have a whole lot of people who are hungry, who are sick, who are unhoused, who need help. Are we going to do something for them or not? I ran for office to help people and solve problems. That's not what this bill does. Thank you. I yield back.
For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. For I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. What will this house do? How will we be remembered when our service here is done? I thank the gentlelady for her comments. And before I yield to our next colleague, I wanted to point out one other interesting provision of this big, beautiful bill. Currently, anyone caring for a dependent child is exempt from SNAP work requirements. Under the proposed legislation passed out of this House, that exemption would apply to those responsible only for those caring for children 6 years and younger. That means that parents, or a single parent, with children aged 7 or older who are currently exempt would have to meet the work requirement in order to receive SNAP benefits. Is that how we want to treat our children, Mr. Speaker? As we ponder that, I'm pleased now to yield to the distinguished colleague from New Jersey, Representative Watson Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Maryland for anchoring this important special order hour. Mr. Speaker, the bill that the House Republicans sent to the Senate would create the largest transfer of wealth from the working class to the well-off in our nation's history. Folks who are already doing everything they can to make ends meet, working several jobs to put food on the table and keep their kids healthy, honest, hopeful, hardworking Americans who just want a fair shot at a better future. These are the people who stand to lose the most under the Republican bill. These are the folks who rely on basic needs programs like SNAP and like Medicaid. These folks aren't lazy. They don't want something for nothing. They just want to feed their families and to take care of their kids. But the Republican plan is to drown them in red tape, to kick them off of their health insurance and force them to choose between feeding their families or paying their rent. They are waging a war of attrition on the working people and those who are most in need. As if this outcome wasn't bad enough, what's maybe worse is the reason that they're doing all of this, because that is to pay for huge tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans. In an attempt to cover the cost of tax write-offs for private jets and yachts and multiple houses, Republicans are cutting back on food assistance for hungry children. I don't know how else you would describe this, but for me, I think it is cruel, it is ugly, it is evil, and I yield back.
Thank you very much.
Thank my colleague for her remarks tonight. At this point, Mr. Speaker, it is my privilege to yield the floor to the distinguished representative from Oregon, Representative Dexter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I echo my colleagues' thanks to our colleague from Maryland for anchoring this incredibly important hour. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to defend food assistance, not just in my district, but for millions of Americans across this country. Republicans passed a bill out of this chamber enacting the largest ever cut to food assistance in our nation's history. This ploy will put extreme pressure on our food banks, leave millions of Americans hungry, and force families to make impossible choices. And let me be clear, hunger is not inevitable. Letting people be hungry is a policy choice. Republicans are choosing to rip the food out of hungry people, hungry families' mouths. And for what? To give tax breaks to billionaires. I want to share a story of Rita, a woman in Portland who wrote into my office claiming if federal food assistance was cut, she will have to choose between buying groceries and paying rent, buying groceries or paying the electrical bill. This is not an unfamiliar story for me as a physician who heard my patients struggling with similar choices. And the cruelty of this bill is not just unconscionable, it is heartless. We are talking about real people battling hunger. In the wealthiest country in the world, Americans shouldn't have to struggle so much just to get by. People deserve to thrive. And Republicans are choosing, again, to give tax breaks for the wealthiest on the backs of working Americans. 1 in 6 community members in my district rely on SNAP. Seniors, children, veterans, and people with disabilities will go hungry. And food stamps aren't a handout. SNAP helps veterans who served our country, neighbors with disabilities. It feeds seniors on fixed income and families with young children. Most of these people have faced unimaginable odds and have nowhere else to turn. We cannot turn our backs on those who need us most. This is a moment for moral clarity. Not one person in this country should go hungry. Not one person should be left behind. And certainly not just so billionaires can line their pockets even further. We have time to stop it, but only if we speak up. Stay loud. And I yield back to my colleague from Maryland. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank the representative and my friend from Oregon for her remarks tonight, Mr. Speaker, reminding us that, in fact, hunger is a choice. We're choosing to prioritize the ultra-wealthy of this country over our seniors, over our veterans, those who have sacrificed so much for this country, and over the future of this country, over our children. We're not willing to spend $6 a day to lift up the most vulnerable among us, to spend $6 a day to feed people who are hungry and provide real opportunities for fellow Americans. I think it's time that all of us in this chamber take a moment to reflect about what we're doing here and what our true priorities are. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to elevate this important issue. I thank my colleagues who have added their voice to this issue, and I hope that as the Senate considers this reconciliation package, particularly around the issue of food security and hunger and feeding our fellow Americans, that we take a hard look in the mirror and think about what we're doing here. And with that, Mr. Speaker, end my comments, and I motion to adjourn the House.
The question is on the motion to adjourn.